Finance Committee meeting of Monday, May 16th, 2022, and ask staff to call the roll, please.
Council President Furman,
Present.
Alder Carter,
Present.
Alder Verveer,
Here.
Alder Figueroa Cole,
Here.
Alder Vitiver,
Present.
Alder Evers,
Here.
Mary of Quorum.
Thank you, and welcome to our new members. Can we have meeting instructions, please?
Absolutely. All right. Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members of the committee, if you're able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video while you're speaking. In this meeting, panelists have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Panelists also have the ability to add pronouns after their names if they choose. Please do not alter the current naming convention. Simply add text after your name. Please use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Staff, please use the raise hand feature when you're asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. Staff will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the committee, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. All right, so our first item is general public comment. We have no one registered on that, so we'll go to disclosures and recusals. Are there any disclosures or recusals for any of the items on today's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to the consent agenda. And just to start us off, we have registrants on items 2, 3, 6, and 22. And then items 23 and 24 are presentations from staff, and item 25 is a discussion. So we'll start with separating those. Are there other items that members of the body would like to have separated from the consent agenda? Alder Verveer?
Thank you, Mayor. All of the items I had questions on have already been separated with the exception of agenda item number 21, which is the sister resolution to 22. So if we could separate 21 and 22 and take them up together, please, when we get to that point.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, are there any other items that others wish to have separated from the consent agenda? Seeing no other hands. Just to confirm then, we would like to exclude items 2, 3, 6, 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. Alder Furman?
Move consent agenda with the exclusion of items 2, 3, 6, 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Alder Carter. Is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, we'll record that vote, and we'll come to item number 2, which is Legislator 71236, regarding a sales clerk position at Monona Terrace. We have one registrant wishing to speak, Mike Keto from District 4.
Yeah, my bad. I was not trying to register for item 2. I apologize.
I wondered.
Because I tried to re-register as not opposed and I made a mess.
Okay. Well, then we will go on. Alder Furman, a motion on item 2.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve item 2. Is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, item 2 is approved. Now on to item 3, which is Legistar 71313, regarding the Administrative Support Clerk 2 position in the Finance Department budget. On item 3, we have 2 speakers, Mike Keto from District 4, to be followed by Kim Owens from District 15. Now, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Then thank you, alders, for giving me this time. Many of you know me, some of you well. You know that Team City is my whole life and career. Nothing's excited me more than that we've started using that term to talk about how we can come together across departments, across agencies, roll up our sleeves and get the work done to make Madison a great place to live, work, and play, and serve our residents the very, very best of our resources and ability. And I can't say how extremely disedifying reading the HR memo was, as being completely antithetical to that notion of Team City. The idea that, and I should contextualize, we need more help in payroll, but we don't need to do it by cutting more resources that get spread around to all of local government. And I know that payroll's overworked because I spend loads of hours helping them out. So it's not even robbing Peter to pay Paul; it's robbing Peter to pay Peter. The whole idea of, so I looked at some of these suggestions of rotating staff and coming up with technical solutions to sort of make the need for clerical staff go away. And I just don't, it could work, but let me tell you what that would look like. It would look like all the HR analysts taking turns covering vacation days at their front desk, which is normally something that I or my team members would do for them. I've been doing it for years, and they often have to be reminded that we need to get a lunch break. So I haven't seen that willingness there, but I see it in the memo. But an example of a tech solution would be if I can't cover the council office or the mayor's office when there's a staff meeting or a vacation or a shortage, a very feasible solution would be to just let the calls go to voicemail and follow up as needed. And after all, if your constituent's calling you, they're not going to talk to you directly anyway when they call me. So why not let it just go to voicemail? But that's not the level of service we're looking for. We want them to reach a real human person and get redirected to the correct agency, or where can they find the answer, the resource they need. And I wouldn't feel good about us having to say, sorry, we can't cover the mayor's staff meetings. Just let all the calls go to voicemail and you follow up when you're done. And that's, those are the sorts of cuts that this memo is proposing us make. And I would hate to do that to our constituents. And I see my timer run out of time. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Kim Owens of District 15.
Hi, I work in parks. We have hundreds of seasonal employees, and spring is our busiest time as we bring all of them on. The A-team staff was able to come through and help us with assisting in hiring and reinstating dozens of them this past spring. Without their help, Parks would not have been able to bring on the necessary staff to work in all of the roles required by Parks' many events, programs, duties. The A-team has also partially covered 2+ week-long vacations by other members of Parks admins this past fall. They are, I can't put into words how helpful they are. So to downsize the A-team would be extremely detrimental. That's all.
Thank you. Are there questions for either of the registrants who spoke? There's also, I think you have in your inboxes a list, several folks available to answer questions. Questions? All right, seeing none, then President Furman, a motion on item 3.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Questions for staff? Seeing none. Alder Verveer.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe all of my questions would probably be most appropriate for the finance director. So Dave, I think the HR memo, makes the strong case for why payroll needs the additional position, as Mike alluded to in his testimony moments ago. So I don't know that any of us have questions about that. Obviously, the controversy comes in reducing the A team from 3 to 2 members following Chris LeMay's recent retirement. Can you just walk us through, please, what steps you took as director? And for those that might not, I think we all realize this, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, the A team, or when I was first elected, the clerical pool, as they were called, has always been housed in the finance department, formerly the comptroller's office. So can you just articulate to us, as their supervisor, ultimately, although I know Eric VM is the direct supervisor, if I remember correctly, why in your estimation you thought that we could reduce the team by a position?
Certainly, Alder Verveer, thank you for that question. And I just want to start off by saying that, the work that Mike has done on the team and others that have been on the team has been great, and they have provided incredible support to agencies. I think we're in a time where we have to, as you all know, we've talked about this many times, where we have to, look at what are the key priorities. You referenced the HR memo on payroll. I think that's pretty straightforward when we think about work that has to be done every 2 weeks. That's payroll. And everybody in the city is touched by that in terms of city employees. And then in turn, those employees provide service to our residents and visitors and so on. I think when we look at the A team, and I sent some information out about this, their primary workload is to support the clerk's office, particularly during elections. That will remain the priority. And the 2 positions that would remain on the A team, that would be their top priority. And then we would look to augment that, if necessary, from other staff in the finance department. But again, recognizing that that is a periodic workload compared to the every other week, every day workload of payroll, as well as the budget team, for which this position is basically going to backfill a quick movement that we did to support payroll. So we will maintain that priority. I think when we look at the other services that the A team provides, it is periodic, and in some instances, that level of service may not be provided, and other alternatives may need to be pursued. On the other hand, we may also need to have clearer scheduling from the agencies. There are times when we get last minute requests, and those may not be able to be fulfilled. So I think to answer your question, when we look at all the work that needs to be done, we look at having to set priorities in this sort of budget and revenue environment we're in with state mandated levy limits. I think we have to look at these areas and possibilities and options when we're looking at core responsibilities like providing payroll, like developing the budget. So I hope that answers your question, Alder.
Yes, well, certainly. I don't know that I agree with everything you just articulated, Dave, but certainly you addressed the question. You anticipated my next question, I believe, but let me ask it anyway. And that is, did you seriously consider not permanently deleting the vacant admin support clerk 2 position, and still assisting Colleen and the others in payroll? In other words, did you seriously consider adding an additional staff member to your department without deleting this other vacant position?
Alder Revere, I think, as you said, I kind of already answered that question, in terms of, we're in a difficult budget situation. We have to look at other options. We've looked to redirect resources in the finance department to a series of other priorities that both the mayor and the council have, namely creating a data team, namely actually expanding the budget team so we can move towards an outcomes-based approach. We also have to reinstitute a internal audit function, which we've kind of held in abeyance because we've had to meet these other priorities. So I think these are challenging times, difficult decisions, and I think those are the steps we've had to take. So again, I hope that answers your question. Did we think about other options? We certainly did, I think. But when it comes down to it, we have to kind of look at, okay, where can we allocate the resources to where they're most needed.
And in the email that you forwarded to the finance committee earlier today that you referenced, you do speak to, as you did earlier in answer to my question, the fact that the city clerk's office has become frankly dependent on the A team for years and years and years for support, particularly around election time, and it certainly helps that Mike Quito is an election expert. I don't see the city clerk in this meeting. Can you share with us your conversations with Mary Beth in this regard in terms of assuring all of us that there would be the coverage, that the coverage is available so that there is if indeed this cut is made, that there is a seamless transition to having a 2-person A team of Mike and Michelle or whoever the 2 incumbents happen to be, that huge void will be filled by the permanent clerk's office staff, particularly as it relates to scheduling of election officials, which I know is a Herculean task.
Discussions have started with the clerk. Those were initiated by Eric VM, who's the supervisor of this unit. So the clerk's office, Mary Beth, is aware of this. I think those discussions, need to continue. I think from what I've heard from about these conversations, I think there's a recognition of perhaps having to look at how the clerk's office might have to address this. I think on the other hand, as I mentioned earlier, we'll continue to have this as a priority for the A team, as well as the extent to which we might need to augment that, whether it's from payroll on a periodic basis or other staff in the finance department, to be sure that workload is addressed. And, you brought up the election scheduling, the election payroll. That was really a responsibility that the A team took over from the clerk's office, I believe, when a certain member of the clerk's office who used to do that work left or retired or whatever. And, again, we're fortunate to have Mike and his skill set and the tremendous work that he's done with that, and we'll continue to work to support that.
Thank you. And perhaps my last question for now, and I see Alderperson Carter has questions as well. So let me close with this one. You've mentioned now a few times that you think perhaps others in the finance department might be able to supplant the A team. Can you talk more in more detail about that? Do you actually believe that there are times when some of the staff in your department do have some flexibility in their workload to perhaps be troubleshooters and join the A team from time to time? Or, is that really realistic, Dave, is what I'm asking?
A lot of this work is related to payroll, and we'll be adding, another position in payroll. So I think some assistance at that time could be possible. We still need to, I think, talk that through. We have other sort of support staff in the finance department that, again, on a periodic basis could support the A team, so that they can focus all their efforts at election time, for example.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Carter, questions?
Yes, most of my questions were answered, so I will just ask one. You mentioned, Dave, possibly having a scheduling system for the A team in the future. Is that something that you are definitely going to do now that they are down to 2?
We have a scheduling system for the A team right now. It's really sort of incumbent on the agencies that may need their assistance to maybe think further in advance so that that can be planned throughout the year. I think we recognize that there might be last minute things that occur, but I think as we move forward with this, presuming that we'll approve it, then that would be the continuing effort of outreach with the agencies on that.
Okay, because going down to 2 people, there probably needs to be some kind of outreach notification to the agencies just to let them know that you don't have 3 people anymore, so you need to look ahead.
Yeah, and that's occurring.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Any other questions for staff? All right, seeing none, the motion is to adopt. Is there discussion? Is there objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of adoption? Alder Verveer?
Thank you, Mayor. I will not be able to support the motion this afternoon. Let me just explain why in a few sentences here. First of all, as everybody knows, I've been around for a very long time in City Hall, and I have learned a long time ago how critical the A team is to the functions of so many of our agencies. They literally have become dependent on the A team. Now, I suppose that realities might set in if the resolution is adopted by the council that they just aren't available anymore. But I think that we're doing a disservice to all of our agencies if we make this cut at this time. As I said earlier in the preamble to my questions of the finance director, I think the strong case has been made in the HR memo why payroll needs assistance. I have no problem whatsoever supporting the additional position for the payroll function. With that said, the problem is permanently deleting this position in that the resolution recreates this position and into the new analyst position. If it created a new position, if it was a budget amendment, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. It would likely be on the consent agenda. Given that the budget process is underway, in fact, obviously one of our agenda items yet this meeting is to, in other words, kick off our capital budget conversation at this level of the committee process. It just seems to me wrongheaded to make this cut at this time when we only have a few months before we start the conversation on the operating budget. If we had to keep the position vacant until the budget process, I could live with that. Probably Mike and Michelle couldn't, and the agencies couldn't that depend on their work. But I just think it's wrongheaded to move forward with this at this time and again upend something that has proved very useful and helpful to the functioning of our operation for so many decades now. So that's why I just can't support the motion. If it was a motion to add the additional position to the finance department, again, no problem, but permanently deleting the A team position is really troublesome to me. And so if there isn't a roll call, Mayor, please record me as voting no. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. So with the exception of Alder Revere, is there objection? Alder Figueroa, we'll just do a roll call. Unless either of you is wishing to speak? No. All right, so the motion is to adopt. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, no. As your name is called, then I'll ask staff to call the roll.
Council President Furman,
Aye.
Alder Carter,
No.
Alder Revere,
No.
Alder Figueroa Cole,
No.
Alder Vitiver,
Aye.
Alder Evers,
No.
Mayor, the vote is 3-3.
I have 2-4.
I'm sorry, 2-4. My apologies.
With 4 noes, the motion fails. And we'll go on to item 6. Is Legistar 71175, authorizing the negotiation and execution of a contract with HNTB for passenger rail study services. On item 6, we have one registrant, Bob Schaefer from District 17.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor and committee members. This topic came up back in 2008, 2010, somewhere back in that time period. The same thing of having the high-speed rail between Madison and Milwaukee, and with the connection up through Columbus, and that what is a concern of mine and needs to be a concern that when bringing in the high-speed rail through Madison, that unlike any other city and most other cities, that the rail system would be all at grade. And at grade crossings mean that every street along the east side is going to be having trains crossing that at grade with signalized crossings. Now, the speed that was projected for high speed was 45 miles an hour throughout the city. The other problem with that is that there is no connection directly through the city and back out the west side of the city, which means that all of the trains have to come into the town and then back out of the town to Columbus to get back onto the main line. And so there's a lot of wasted time in doing that. I think that when we look at the cost of it, that it would be far better to offer free bus service from the airport to Columbus for people that want to use the train, rather than the millions of dollars that'll cost in upgrading the current freight rail, which the passenger rail would have to be upgraded in order to be able to use that, because currently that the freight is limited to about 10 to 15 miles an hour because of the the condition of the rail system. So I think that this ought to not be considered, not that it's important, but when you look at the city of Milwaukee, that and the number of grade crossings there, that very few, if any, by the time the train enters the city, which means that people going from Madison, that they're going to have to go all the way downtown to get the train, and when they get to Milwaukee, they're going to have to go from downtown out to wherever they want to go. And I think that what's going to happen is people are going to be more inclined to use the automobile and everything like that, or private service, or even bus service. And I think this is going to be a waste of money and time. And based on the documentation that I have, I studied it very thoroughly. I did a Google search throughout Google Earth search. So I have all of the information. If anybody is interested in that, I'll be glad to share it.
Thank you. Are there any questions of our registrant? Seeing none, President Furman, a motion on item 6.
Move adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Alder Carter. Are there any questions or a discussion on item 6? Alder Rivera.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a couple questions for the Transportation Director, please. I think Tom would be the most appropriate. So my first question, let me just state at the outset that the two concerns I want to ask you about, Tom, came to me by way of Barry Gore, somebody that the mayor and I have known for well over a dozen years on this issue, ever since we had our last conversation about Amtrak coming to our community. And I don't know if you saw his email. I don't know if the email went to the whole council or just some alders, certain alders. But anyway, the two questions that he raises that I wanted to ask are, number one, his concern that HNTB has a bit of a conflict of interest, allegedly, because he states that they are WSDOT's rail consultant, and in essence makes the case that their work for us will be biased in that they'll recommend whatever WSDOT hopes that they would recommend to us. Could you please address that concern first, Tom?
We have both Tom and Philip here who've been working on this. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, HMTB does have a contract with WSDOT. However, I'm going to say that WSDOT, while we are interacting with them on this, they have been quite, I want to say, hands off as far as Madison making their own decisions. In fact, we will be pursuing special funds from the FRA, perhaps with other cities within the next month or so, making a request that we could be put into one of the corridor identification programs. And for instance, WSDOT will not be part of that. That will be a Madison effort with other partners such as Dane County or Pewaukee or the like. We're working on that now. However, WSDOT is there to assist, but right now they are not driving. So I don't feel like there's a real conflict. There is one other firm that does this type of work that could have also submitted. They're based out of Chicago. There are really two main firms that do this, HNTB and this firm out of Chicago. Both have had or do have contracts with WSDOT. So that's, so I think if we want someone that's qualified in rail work, we'll have to realize that they have other clients as well.
Thank you. Before I get to the other issue that Barry Gore raised, again, for those that don't know Barry, he's been a long-time rail advocate here. And when I look at the resolution, so either Philip or Tom, if you could just answer this one for me before I go to the other issue. And that is, when I read the resolution, it states that HNTB was a successful proposer to your RFP process, the purchasing conducted. But then the way you just stated it, Tom, it makes it sound like perhaps HNTB was our sole proposer. Can you confirm how many responses we received?
That's correct. HNTB was a sole. However, we prepared a separate evaluation and matrix to determine if they were qualified under, the 3 or 4 categories that we had requested, and they were. Some had asked. Actually, I think I'll just leave it at that. I suspect you might have a follow-up question, and we'll answer it when you have a follow-up question. So that's correct.
Okay. So the other issue raised was that $120,000 would not be sufficient to do a thorough job for us, and Barry goes on to state that he forwarded our RFP to all of the major station planning and design firms around the country, and all of them said that they were not interested, including, like, he names a few in his email. FX Collaborative is one in New York City, because their budget was inadequate. So could you or Philip address your confidence that $120,000 will be sufficient for the work that we are seeking to be completed for us?
Yeah, actually, I think we had the same cautions and hesitations that buried it. And because of that, within our RFP, we stated that if the budget wasn't sufficient, that the proposer could make alternate scope alterations to bring a proposed proposal within the budget. So let's say if they felt like our scope was too high for the funds that were available, they were given the liberty to change the scope or make suggestions to the scope changes to bring their proposal into budget. We did not receive any questions or requests for that, and HNTB did not request any scope revisions to bring the study into the budgeted amount. They feel like they can accomplish the scope with the budget that we have allocated.
Right. And so in closing, the bottom line is you are comfortable and confident that we'll be able to receive the deliverables that we're hoping for with this contract.
Yes. Yeah. HNTB is a very accomplished firm.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, they're very accomplished. They were the lead on the high-speed rail, but they also are very cognizant that this is not a high-speed rail project anymore. This is a different project. This is the extension of the Hiawatha. They've done similar studies like this in Minnesota and other places. And so I'm very confident that they can accomplish the work. And I've been maybe answering most of these, but I also just want to turn it over to Philip. Philip will be the project manager on the Amtrak. And Philip, do you have any additions to my answers that you might want to add?
No, I would completely agree. They're a very accomplished firm, and they provided responses to our questions that more than met the requirements that we set forth. So I think that they're going to do good work for us.
Thank you. I appreciate your confidence, Philip and Tom, very much. Thanks for your responses. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for staff on item 6? Seeing none, it's been moved and seconded. Is there objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of item 6 and move on to item 21. Is there objection to taking items 21 and 22 together? Seeing no objection, then it's item 21, Legistar 71186, and item 22, Legistar 71182, regarding the resource recovery special charge. We have one registrant on item 22, Bob Schaefer from District 17.
It's puzzling that we come along and are looking at these fees, which is part of the tax base or tax property tax thing right now, and that basically everybody in the city in some way or another either uses this or some other provider, and that it looks like to me what is happening is that the city is looking to try to accommodate its budget, which in some ways, basically following the BRT project, that one of the things that's been discussed in that project is in order to speed up the passenger service, to make those free service. So what we're doing is we're taking one resource that is currently thing, and we're making that service free, but passing on the tax things that used to be taken care of taxes into an additional tax. I think that if we were to have a citywide vote on this, I think it would fail. And I think that that the alders that are approving this are not really acting in the best interest of their constituents. So I think that this is something that's not popular with the community, and I think that it ought to be continued to be covered under the same financial resources that it was covered in the past. And we could end up with fees to do this and fees to do that and fees to do this. And that it's hard to break it down, who pays those fees and how it affects those. Obviously, these are going to affect the low income people more than those who can afford that. And we're just adding more and more costs to them and to the other people. And I think that I think that if it is relegated to just the recycling, and if it's on a per unit basis, if you use the recycling, then you get the fee. Or if it's just in general to everybody, I think that the other course on that is for everybody to just start dumping the stuff in the garbage and not using the recycling bins. So I know that there are a lot of people that I've talked to who are strongly opposed to this. And I think that it is something that ought to be voted down.
Thank you. Are there questions for our registrant? Seeing none, on items 21 and 22, a motion, please.
Move adoption.
There's a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there questions for staff? Alder Verveer?
Thank you. So the street superintendent can probably guess what I want to ask him about one more time, one last colloquy here about my parochial downtown concern regarding those that already pay for our mall maintenance special charges services. Charlie, when I reviewed the policy that's before us now, I couldn't find a provision that clearly certainly states what you've shared with me privately on a couple of occasions that my constituents or others' constituents currently pay the mall maintenance special charges. They would clearly be exempt from this new special charge. Could you or Doran direct me to where in the policy that is the case?
Alder Verveer, it's not in the policy. However, we're not looking to double charge the mall concourse ratepayers. They already pay for increased trash and recycling services. And those are already being taken care of. And we've reviewed that with parks, and we've removed ratepayers from the mall special charge, from the recycling, from the resource recovery special charge, since they're already paying additional.
And I appreciate that, and I certainly believe you 100%. So don't take this the wrong way. Was there a reason why we couldn't clearly codify that in the policy? And I see Doran's turned his camera on. If Assistant City Attorney Visti wishes to answer that question, but anyway, whichever one of you gentlemen wish to perhaps explain why that isn't clearly called out in the policy. Doran, you're muted.
We can't hear you, Doran.
The policy is set up so that only those persons who are receiving the service get charged. As you know, the mall concourse is also a special charge, and those people are already charged for this service of all the additional services that they get with being part of that district. So I don't think we can charge the people under the resource recovery charge because they're already paying, as Charlie noted, they're already getting the expanded service for the mall concourse charge. I don't think we need to carve out the duplicate services. It would be the way I would look at it. It would be, it's like unnecessary to put that in there because they're not getting the standard service. They're already paying, and they have been paying for 30 years. Actually almost 40 years by now.
Stay longer than that.
40 years, I think, that additional service fee. That was actually it's the special charge that has formed the basis for all the other ones and sets the case law for it. So it's certainly something that I was conscious of when we were drafting this. I just didn't think it was necessary for us to call out the exemptions, just like it wouldn't be necessary to call out the specific parcels that are otherwise exempt here or who don't get the service. The mall concourse people just get a separate level of service that they already pay extra for. I hope that answers your question.
Certainly, I appreciate all that, and I don't mean to belabor the point, but as I look at the draft policy, it certainly talks about exclusions and goes into, you know, some detail of the 6 pages as to who would and would not be receiving the recycling services. So you really didn't think there was a way to make it clear in this policy that if you're already paying a similar special charge for services by the city, that you're not being charged twice?
Well, I don't think it's necessary. I mean, certainly could add that clause in there if that's something that you think is appropriate. I don't think it doesn't do anything one way or the other, but if you feel that would be appropriate, we can certainly add that in.
I really appreciate that if we could.
Sure. I mean, it would just be basically clarifying what I said, that
exactly
they're already getting a special charge for the additional services, which for mall concourse includes recycling, along with numerous other things. But
absolutely.
I think Charlie and I can add a sentence in to address that.
I really appreciate that, Dorian, and Charlie, thank you very much. If we could, you know, have a second draft, you know, in time for the council meeting, and you know, next Tuesday, I'd greatly appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Are there any further questions for staff on items 21 or 22? Seeing none, is there discussion? Seeing no discussion, is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor? Alder Carter?
Can you put me down as no? Thank you.
We'll record Alder Carter as voting no. With that exception, we'll record aye votes. Seeing no objection, that will be 1 aye and 5 ayes and 1 no. I had to count you. All right. With 5 ayes, those items pass. And we are on to item 23, which is Legislator 71488, the 2022 Q1 Program and Expenditure Report for the Arpa funds. And it looks like Christine is here with a presentation.
Good afternoon to the members of the Finance Committee. I'm going to share a presentation and have several staff join to provide updates on the status of ARPA funding. Dave will provide a brief overview of the state and local fiscal recovery funds from the American Rescue Plan Act. We'll look at the expenditures and obligations through the end of March 2022, and staff from CDD, EDD, and Public Health will talk about their plans in the next few months for programs and projects utilizing those funds. Dave?
Hi, Christine. So just a reminder, when we talk about the ARPA, it's the American Rescue Plan Act. We're specifically talking about the state and local fiscal recovery funds. Again, as you probably recall, the city's allocation from that fund was a little over $47 million. It covers costs incurred between March of 2021 and December of 2024. And by costs, we mean obligations. Those obligations can be spent through 2026. The first half of that money was received a year ago. We anticipate the second half this month. Again, through council action, a little less than half of that was allocated for community investments. That's what we'll be focusing on in this presentation. Again, towards the addressing those impacts of the pandemic and focusing on one-time expenses rather than ongoing expenses, given the one-time nature of this funding. The other slightly more than half of this funding was allocated for government services, that category within the fund. And most of that funding has been programmed, whether in the 2021 or 2022 budgets. both to help stabilize the general fund, close a large portion of the 2022 budget gap, as you recall, as well as stabilizing the Monona Terrace Enterprise Fund and the room tax fund. There's roughly 4.4 million that has not yet been programmed that remains for either the 2022 if necessary, but probably the 2023 budget. So again, just a reminder on the program expenditure report, we have to report quarterly under the U.S. Treasury rules. We have reported on the first quarter of 2022. You can see the expenditure period and corresponding report due date. And then each year the city has to file a recovery plan. I think it's all cities over 250,000 have to submit such a plan. We gave an initial sort of more an outline of a plan last July, and we'll have that probably more comprehensive report will be due this year at the end of July of 2022. Christine?
Thanks. So this slide just has a summary of expenditures through the end of March. So 5 of the projects that were approved by the council expended about $2.2 million of ARPA funding for community investments, and all of these projects are in the CDD purview. This includes connection to basic needs, summer youth re-engagement, and the fall youth employment expansion, as well as funding for emergency rental assistance program operations, which is funding LTE staff, and unsheltered homeless support, which includes 2 programs, the Dairy Drive encampment, as well as hotel rooms at the plaza. This will look similar to the update we provided in February for the first quarterly expenditure report. The only new program that has started spending funds is the rental assistance program operations. So for the next few slides, agency staff will provide updates around what projects will be coming online in the next few months. So we'll start with CDD. And there's several staff from CDD, Jim, Lynette, Yolanda. I don't know who wants to get us started.
Why don't I kick this off? What do you see on this slide under the human services category are a couple of activities that really represent executing decisions that this council has already made. They include providing services to residents in our community who are undocumented. So we conducted a funding process, and the council approved allocations to a number of agencies. Those contracts have been finalized. In some cases, work has begun, and in the balance, it will begin very shortly. Likewise, we used a previous RFP process to allocate funds toward the expansion of summer youth employment activities. Those were decisions also that the council has previously given their approval for. We have identified a number of agencies who we will be working with this summer to use additional funds to provide mentoring and other types of supports and services. I think the difference in this second category, as much as anything, might be efforts that will be made to more specifically target youth in the community that are either in contact with the justice system or deemed to be at risk of that. So what I would characterize is a bit more in the realm of violence prevention. The last item on in that category efforts that we wanted to make to use a consultant to take a closer look at the provision of of services to older adults in Madison, and specifically how we use the Madison Senior Center to do that. We conducted an RFP process previously. It was unsuccessful. We are or have reworked that RFP. We're also in the midst of a transition at the Madison Senior Center, and so we want to get a successor to Sally Jo Spaney on board before we reissue that RFP, and we'll begin that as soon as that is completed. We expect later this year. Why don't I stop on the human services side and see if there are any questions?
Not seeing any questions, Jim.
Okay.
Oh, Alder Vitever.
Sorry, just trying to find all my buttons. I just had a question, and this is a little bit tangential, but this is finite funding. So we're, providing funding to our community partners for this work. I'm just wondering if the city is planning to provide any technical assistance to those partners for how to transition them from the city funding that will end to whatever comes next for them, so that they're prepared to continue their good work after the end of this funding.
It's a very good question. Alder will certainly be providing and have, but we'll continue to provide technical assistance, particularly to organizations that have been selected to utilize these funds that have not been recipients in the past of city financial support. In some cases, for example, in youth employment, we are generally speaking using these funds to expand already existing programs. We're also preparing to undertake a new request for proposals process that will set the stage for funding in 2023 and beyond. And so we'll use that opportunity to segue, I think, from the use of these funds to a more stable and ongoing commitment of city funds. In that second category of youth employment and violence prevention, we are committing a level of funds that will afford us the opportunity to work with these organizations and monitor and evaluate their work, support them, and hopefully prepare them to continue those activities for at least a second year, and perhaps expand on them depending on how things go. So we're taking those kinds of steps, but we've made clear as we've taken steps to allocate these funds that they are time limited, and we'll do everything we can to help transition, but agencies have gone into these processes, I think, and hope with the understanding that these are time limited funds.
There are questions? All right, Jim, back to you.
Okay, under the affordable housing and homelessness category, the council had allocated $400,000 to provide administrative support in implementing in us administering tens of millions of dollars of emergency rental assistance that we've received from the federal government. So we have brought on board staff to provide that administrative support and outreach support. They've been at work now for the last about month, and that program is functioning pretty well, and we are anticipating an influx of additional federal funds for which they will be available to provide the support that they're now providing. I think you all know the permanent men's shelter. We've dedicated $2 million of ARPA funds to support its development. So there won't be a lot happening in 2022, but we'll be looking to the 2023 capital budget to round out the financing for that project and then to take steps to start moving forward. The solar panels at Occupy Madison, those are scheduled to be installed later this year. Youth-centered housing, there have been there's been work done around services for young people experiencing homelessness on a broader scale. We've after several years as a community of submitting applications to the federal government, we've been accepted to receive ongoing support for work related to addressing youth homelessness. And so we look forward to using this $2 million to complement those efforts and anticipate later this year releasing an RFP to solicit proposals to develop more permanent housing options for young people. And then lastly, on consumer lending, this is a particularly difficult time to be working to promote new home buyers from getting into the market, but we certainly want to do that, and staff not only with CDD but the city's finance department and others have been working for some time through a philanthropic organization connected to Bloomberg to try to develop policy changes and improvements to our existing program that can make our resources more accessible and more useful. And we've got decided interest in tilting these programs toward households of color and provide more opportunities and better opportunities for them to acquire home ownership.
Questions on that piece? Alder Evers.
Thank you, Mayor. Jim, regarding youth-centered housing, is this connected to work that's been done about housing for young people transitioning out of foster care? I know that it has been identified, I believe, in the mayor's budget at one point. Is this one of the projects that ARPA will help fund?
Yes, it is, Alder Evers. It's that cohort of youth who are either facing the prospect of becoming homeless and others that might actually be experiencing homelessness. That's exactly who this project is intended to support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Carter, questions?
Yes, it's still on the youth-centered housing. Are we working with the Department of Children and Families, who also launched a program a few years ago for youth that are aging out of foster care to get housing?
Alder Carter, I don't know that we've consulted that agency yet. It certainly makes all the sense in the world that we do that as we develop a request for proposals and proceed with that. But frankly, we've not yet gotten to that point with this proposal that we're putting that RFP together.
Okay.
We'll certainly make note.
Yeah, because I think that theirs is a little bit further along, and it'd be good to hear from them on what they learned. Thank you.
Thanks for the suggestion.
Alder Figueroa Cole.
Thank you, Mayor. Jim, is this posted already online somewhere that this is coming down the pipe for the youth center housing?
Not yet. No, again, Alder Figueroa Cole, we're not not far enough along. We don't have an RFP that's been drafted yet. We've got some work to do before we're ready to go with this. And I think we were of the mind that that some of the agencies that that may be involved in supporting this population are currently focused on securing those federal funds and developing a plan that needs to be approved by HUD before those funds can be released. And then we expect that a facility like this, a development like this, could complement that work. But that's kind of where the focus is today on youth homelessness. But we'll certainly be moving on, and again, we hope before this year is out to have an RFP available for organizations to respond to.
Yeah, I mean, I got an inquiry actually last week about this topic, and I really didn't know. I did send it to your team, and I don't know where the information came from. So I was wondering if I have missed something online.
Alder,
yeah.
It's been posted as part of our ARPA allocation.
Thank you. Maybe that's what it was. It was like a general question. I didn't know, so I sent it to Yolanda or Nancy to. Yeah, I sent them their way. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, and I believe that I believe we've also posted information, Alder Figueroa Cole, on our website that projects forward the different RFPs that we anticipate releasing this year, and that certainly would have been on it. So it may have drawn the attention of somebody in that way as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for Jim on this section? Seeing none, then we'll go on.
Next, we have Saran speaking about projects and economic development.
Thank you, Jim. Hello, Saran.
Hello, good afternoon. All right, so the public market project is moving along. Construction is expected to start in November. And then we've got our neighborhood business district support. This will be the grant program to support businesses or business organization in activating and reactivating their neighborhood business districts. So we're currently working on developing the program guidelines and application, getting feedback from the community, staff, and other city agencies. And then we plan to introduce to the Common Council in August. Our downtown vacant art program, we now have a property owner who is interested in participating in this program. So we are in the process of developing an RFP for an art organization to help run the program and work with local artists to display their artwork in the vacant storefront. And then our retail building improvement grant. This is the grant program that will provide funds to tenants and property owners to improve their commercial space. We've completed a racial equity analysis on the project, and then we plan to go live with the program in August. And then our small business equity and recovery program. So those are multiple programs or projects under this program here. And just we listed a few that will start this summer. Our partnership with Madlit. Their program is going to run July through October, and we've introduced that to the Common Council back last week, and it should be back to the Common Council for final approval next week. And this is the event series that supports entrepreneurs of color, local artists, and then performing on the 100 Block of State Street. And then our pop-up shop program, we're finalizing the new pop-up shop locations, and then we plan to release an RFP in July. The Biz Ready program, we're currently working on developing the program guidelines for that, and this will be a new program to assist underrepresented entrepreneurs to launch and grow their business, and planning to get that ready in July as well. And finally, the Carts and Parks program, we are working with our Parks Department to assist micro food vendors, such as small business food carts, to vend in the parks, and then the applications will be available coming up in June. Any questions?
Questions for Saran? I'm not seeing any. Thank you, Saran.
Thank you. And our last agency update is from Public Health. Ariel?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Few updates on our ARPA projects. The first being violence prevention. So we issued our violence prevention roadmap RFP today. So that is live on our website. So we are hoping to gain some applicants to work in our 3 priority areas, which include supporting children, youth, and family activities, fostering strong neighborhoods, and also working on bolstering our intervention and healing services. Hopefully we will get some awesome applicants and have the chance to work with some community partners a little closer on those efforts. We have also posted our violence prevention grant program specialist position that is also funded out of our ARPA allotment. That position is set to close this Friday. So far, we have not had any applicants yet, so I will put in a shameless plug of if you're able to share with your networks, please do. CARES project, we are allocating money from our ARPA allotment for CARES evaluation. So we are still working through this with UW Population Health Institute for exactly what type of evaluation is needed to best support this program at this point. So we should be getting an update on what their recommendations for evaluation are, I believe, in the next few weeks. And then last but certainly not least, our Pfas education and outreach efforts. And so we are actively working with a few select community partners around planning for some additional outreach and engagement. We are hoping to contract with these partners in the future once we have those planning efforts better secured.
Questions for Ariel? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Ariel.
Great. So thank you to Jim, Saran, and Ariel for talking about what's going on in their agencies. Although we've only spent $2 million of the community investments fund so far, there's a lot of work that's going on to plan for expending the full allocation within the time period. The next 2 slides are really just for reference. This has a list of all of the various ARPA reports and resolutions that have come to the Council and Finance Committee to date, and we'll keep this updated. Again, we'll continue providing these quarterly updates after each time we submit one of our expenditure reports to Treasury. And you'll also be seeing ARPA funding in the 23 budget. And this again is just a reference of the early timeline of how we got to the projects that you heard staff discuss and our process for working with the recovery teams to develop project proposals and introduce to the council. So that is it for the ARPA presentation today.
Thank you, Christine. Any overall questions? All right, seeing none, thank you. We'll go on to item 24, which is Legistar 71490, overview of 2023 capital budget agency requests.
That's me again. So Dave and I will be talking through the 2023 capital budget, and we'll be joined by Steve Kumar from the Equity and Social Justice Division Manager to talk about our efforts to bring equity decisions into the budget. So the first section will focus generally about the budget process and timeline, including key dates. I'll spend a little bit of time on the budget website to talk about how you can navigate the documents and read through the agency proposals. We'll go through an overview of agency requests, including how the 2023 requests compare to the adopted budget, and look at some major projects by year, as well as the qualifications for the Horizon list and carry forward appropriations. And then Dave will close on talking about some general considerations for developing the executive budget, such as our target borrowing. So just starting off with a quick reminder, the city has 2 budgets. There's the capital budget and the operating budget. They're planning documents that authorize how the city will spend money in the upcoming year. Capital budget funds infrastructure. So when you think of roads, bike lanes, affordable housing, these are funded in the capital budget. And the purpose is really ensuring infrastructure is safe and advancing goals around climate change, housing, and other issues like Metro Forward. And capital budget items are primarily paid through borrowing. Throughout the budget documents, you'll see general obligation borrowing or GO borrowing, and that's money that we have to pay back. Special assessments, user fees, and federal state grants are also used to finance capital projects. So you'll see, ARPA money, for example, funding some capital projects such as the permanent men's shelter. On the other hand, the operating budget pays for daily services. Most of the staff time is paid through the operating budget. And also it funds paying community organizations to deliver services on behalf of the city. And when you think of core city operations like keeping parks programming, keeping libraries open, trash and recycling pickup, these are items in the operating budget. And here, the budget is primarily funded by property taxes with charges for services, special charges, user fees, and federal and state aid as components as well. The two budgets, we have a process for each of them, and they're staggered throughout the year. So in the next few months, we'll be launching the operating budget process, and we'll be engaging the finance committee and council through that process as well. But the two processes do interact, and within the operating budget, you'll see something called debt service, which is how we repay the borrowing we take out to fund capital projects. Here we have some key dates for budget development. I shared this slide in a presentation earlier this year. Right now, we are in right around here. We're in the middle of capital briefings with the mayor's office. And the budget team will be working on developing the capital budget over the next few months with a plan to introduce to the council in September. There will be a series of briefings where agencies present their proposals to the finance committee and an opportunity for the committee to make amendments. Starting in June, we will be kicking off the operating budget. Agencies will have a few weeks to develop their proposals, and briefings will take place in August with the executive budget introduced in October. And the full council will have an opportunity to submit amendments and have meetings to adopt the budget in November. When I get to the end of this section, I'll actually flip my screen share to go to the budget website itself. But everything you need to know, including these key dates, are on cityofmadison.com/budget. We'll update the webpage throughout the year as we hit each of the different phases. And you can also find historic documents going back to 2012 through 2022. When we'll look at an agency request, but just something to keep in mind is that each agency capital request consists of 3 sections. The first 1 to 2 pages of each request will be a summary and analysis prepared by the budget team. So this has some key changes between the 2022 adopted and 2023 agency request. The next section will be a transmittal memo written and submitted by the agency head, describing how they developed their budget proposal, how they prioritized projects within their agency, and any considerations for scaling projects. And then there will be a printout of a SharePoint form for each proposal. So every proposal will have a form that's usually 3 to 4 pages where the agency answers a series of questions around how the project advances city priorities, the cost per year, and other details. And before I flip to that, I wanted to turn the stage over to Christy to talk about some of the ways that we've been collaborating on equity in the budget.
Thanks, Christine. Hi, everyone. Excited to say that our collaboration with finance has led to kind of year 2 of the formalized equity in the budget. So essentially, the equity in the budget process integrates explicit considerations of racial equity and social justice into budget development and resource allocation. So we see this incorporation as both a process and a product. And so we've taken a lot of lessons learned from our first year last year. You all may have seen, perhaps we were a little overzealous. We had like 7.5 sub questions for every department to think about all the different dynamics. And so we heard a lot of feedback and we made some key changes this year. So for the capital budget, you'll see one of the first questions within the racial equity and social justice section. One of the first questions asked, is this program or project focused on routine maintenance or repair? Might be a little bit hard to see, but that's the first one. And that really bifurcates like all of our projects and programs into kind of 2 categories. A lot of agencies were having difficulties in the narrative portion of things that just needed to get done, sewers that just needed updates, roads that just needed updates within these 7.5 equity questions. And so now we ask them, is this routine maintenance or repair? And they still have to talk to us about what kind of equity lens may or may not have impacted their prioritization of these maintenance or repair questions. If it's not a maintenance or repair question, they kind of jump down to the second portion. You'll see we ask pretty key questions here. The first is, what specific inequities does the program intend to address? How and for whom? We ask, what data helped shape your proposal? Data may include qualitative and quantitative data, such as demographic, qualified census tracts, environmental justice areas, specific recommendations from a racial equity and social justice analysis or other sources, really being spacious with how we're thinking about data. And then for all projects, we're asking if it's related to a recommendation from a neighborhood resource team to identify the team and being as specific as possible. We'll go maybe back to the last slide. I got excited about the questions, Christine. I'll just look back and see. So another piece that we did this year, so we updated the questions, simplified, but something else that I'm really excited about that we worked in collaboration with finance team was we developed an equity in the budget guide. So we met with folks who were budget contacts. We met with partner equity teams. We met with a lot of folks who said, we need more guidance on like what you are looking for. And so we developed a guide that does some baseline things. We explain what we mean by equity. We explain what we mean by racial equity. We explain some terms that like, I think we use somewhat jargon in the social justice world. And we really like explain what we mean by those pieces. And then we even went into kind of highlighting some equity strategies. These are places that we felt like gaps were missing last year when we read all the budget proposals. And so I'll just read some of the main equity strategies we highlighted in the guide this year. One, it's pretty obvious, but we'll say it again and again. Prioritize equity over equality. We have some strategy tips on how to do that. We ask folks to be equity data driven and to be kind of nuanced about the data. And then we even listed different data sources in the guide that folks could look to. We ask folks to value relationships and community engagement, talking about acknowledging realities and dynamics that communities have already pointed out, and listed the Res J Public Participation Guide as a resource. And then we ask folks to plan to be accountable, deciding who's going to track progress, how they would track these goals, and how they would communicate to community members about this. So that guide has been dispersed, so folks have some more tools in the toolkit. And then I serve in the mayor's management team to participate in budget development and including reviewing proposals for equity opportunities. And so I just want to name that part that departments are answering all these questions, and then there's an opportunity to actually engage in dialogic kind of question and answers to go further than what's on, a 200-word list of pieces that they're writing about equity. And so that's proved really fruitful for asking important questions and hearing folks' responses. I think I might have covered one thing. Let's see how many more slides you got me for, Christine.
I think it was just those two. Thank you, Christy. As Christy mentioned, this is our second year incorporating equity questions into the budget, and it's been an evolving process, but finance and DCR has a really strong collaboration, and I'm really excited about some of the work we're doing. I'm just going to briefly, before Going to the next section, looking at the capital budget proposals, I'm going to briefly walk through how you can find this material online. Do you see EmployeeNet pulled up? So just quickly to where you can find the equity and the budget guide. If you go to cityofmadison.com/EmployeeNet and go to city budget, it is listed under other reference materials. And when you open that file, it's a PDF guide that, again, has an overview of the process, the questions that we're asking, and some of the strategies and tips that Christy had went over just now. And then on our main page, which is cityofmadison.com/finance/budget, we have a timeline for each of the budget phases with each of the key dates. So if you can't find that slide I went over, you can see what's coming up on this page. Each of the phases will be highlighted when we're at that point in time with whatever reference materials we have available. So for budget kickoff, this links to the mayor's message where you can read the guidelines that went out to agencies around planning, prioritization, guidelines around requesting new projects, etc. When you go to the agency request page, this will open up a new page that has all of the agency requests, both as a single file and the breakdown by agency. So here, if I were to select engineering like PED, this first page again is a summary prepared by the budget team. The table up top has a comparison of the 2022 adopted budget and the 2023 requests, both for the 2023 budget year and for the span of the CIP. You can see the list of all of the projects and the funding request by year. And then this graph compares the 2023 request with the 2022 adopted amount. And we have summarized the major changes between the years. And so some will note that federal funding for this project has increased, or if there's a new project, that will all be noted here. The next few pages are the transmittal memo that the agency head writes and submits to the budget team. So they'll talk about their agency goals, their prioritization list, and a summary of changes as well. And then there is a form for each of the project proposals. So you'll see the project name, how the agency prioritized the project, a brief description including any updates, and how the project aligns with strategic plans and priorities, including Imagine Madison, racial equity and social justice goals, and climate resilience and sustainability goals. And then the next section is really the budget and financial information. So you can see how much was previously appropriated, the funding source for the project, as well as the project type. And then there will be some details around the project schedule and location. So sometimes the location will be a specific address, sometimes this will be a narrative, and sometimes it gets cut off by the text box. So if you really want to see something that might be hidden, please reach out, and we're trying to pull this together into an Excel sheet as well. And then you can see how the project is phased. And then the last section talks about any operating costs that might be associated with the project. So this, depending on whether people select yes or no to some questions, it might look slightly different per form, but that's kind of the basic components of each of the agency requests. Before moving on, we can pause if anyone has questions.
Alder Figueroa Cole.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Christine. Hey, can you go back, please, to the graph that shows last year the adopted budget versus the request? That right there. So the 2022 adopted, or it says adopted step. So that's the amount that we adopted in 2023. I mean, last year for 2023, and then the darker one is the changes? Is
Yeah,
that-
so
Go
yeah,
ahead.
so in the 2022 budget, you only appropriated funds for 2022, and then there was a plan for the out years, and then so that is what was approved in the SIP is in this lighter gray, and then the darker gray is what the agency is requesting. That's correct.
Right, so those are the gray is the projection we made last year for the future years.
Yeah, it was what was adopted by the council.
Yeah, got it. And then one thing that I missed of the reviews that I did, I mean, I was looking at that one by one to make sure that the numbers match, but that's way too much work. I will trust the spreadsheet. The one thing that I missed on the documents was the prioritization. What was the scale? I saw that this one has one of the projects have the number 5. What's the scale? Is it 1 to 10, 1 to 5?
So it's 1 to the number of projects you have. So the finance department, for example, has we only have 1 project, so our 1 project is our number 1 priority. It can be anywhere from 1 to 20, but the easiest place to see this is in the transmittal memo, because every memo will include a list.
Okay. Thank you. And that's it. Thank you for all this work and for always answering all my questions. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Are there other questions at this point? Alder Vitiver, is that you with a question?
Yes. So I was just wanted to ask about, I had previously, I think, asked Director Schmidtke about results-based budgeting, and I sort of wanted to understand, that that's sort of a transitory, that we're in transition and moving in that direction. And so I sort of want to understand the intersection between looking at things with racial equity and social justice and the results-based budgeting process.
Alder Vitiver, I mean, that's definitely a part of it. That's why we're incorporating these sorts of questions into the budget. You'll also notice, and I think Christine highlighted it, we also asked them to link the proposals to elements of a great city in Imagine Madison. So these are really the foundational elements of moving towards a results-based or outcome-based budget. And then the next steps will be, particularly in the operating budget, but also in the capital budget, identifying or having city agencies update their services that they provide. And then we'll budget at that service level, and we'll have performance measures around that. And then that can then inform how the budget gets developed, how decisions are made from that performance perspective.
Alder Figueroa Cole?
I wasn't going to ask, but since you brought it up, I'll ask then. Do you have a matrix, some sort of matrix that shows where we are with the agencies providing that level of detail for the budget lines? I know that MPD and fire department are the largest areas, so it's taking them longer to get there. But it's for everybody else. You have something that shows that, like some sort of tracker to show where we are with that?
Well, we have not yet implemented those new services, Alder Figueroa Cole, so we don't really have that level of detail at the new services. We do have it at the current services, but again, that's, the police department is probably one of the better examples of, they have 2 services, and that really doesn't give you a sense of what it is that they do in terms of delivering services, results, and so on to the residents of the city. So that next step will be, I think, re-engaging with the agencies, and we'll be coming back to you, I think, over the next couple of months to update you on where we're at with this process. But that next step is re-engaging the agencies on those new services that they identified 2-3 years ago, making sure that's what they still want to do, making some adjustments where necessary. And then we need to go through a pretty extensive process once we settle on those services of realigning what we call our chart of accounts in our financial system so that we can then track all of that, both actuals and budget at those new services level. Anticipate, we'll run through what that timeline looks like, but it'll probably be the next 2, 3, 4 years before we can get to that point.
Yeah, I noticed that some agencies kind of getting ahead of the process. Is that like on their own, or are they just have special mappings? I mean, it seems like some agencies are ahead and some are not moving at all. But yet we don't have a project in place to get to that result.
Well, I guess I would say we do have a project in place. We're working on the project. Some agencies are not going to change their services that much, so they can show what they're doing already in terms of that detail of budget and actual to what their services are, and some can't at this point. So.
Okay. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Elder. Other questions before we go on? Christine?
Thanks for those excellent questions around outcome budgeting and how to get closer to aligning the budget with goals. And thanks for pinch hitting there, Dave. So the next section will talk about the agency requests, and I just have some charts and graphs to share that take a closer look at the requests by year and by agency. So the 2023 request is about $364 million greater than the 2022 adopted SIP. So this is just comparing what was requested between 2023 and 2027. In this graph, the darker color is what was adopted in 2022, and the lighter blue is what was in the 2023 request. And the solid color is the breakdown between what's geo borrowing, and the hashed line is other sources, which includes federal grants. So between 2023 and 2027, the 2023 request is about $1.2 billion, which again is more than $360,000 greater than what was adopted in last year's SIP. There are pretty significant assumptions of state and federal funding, particularly with the bipartisan infrastructure law, but it does add about $180 million of new borrowing at that time frame. In addition, the requests add about $170 million in 2028, which including about $101 million in new borrowing. If we just look at borrowing, again, this is just breaking down that solid line in the graph above. You can see the new borrowing by year. So in 2023, the requests include about $36 million more in borrowing. In 2024, it's about $78 million. And again, the total over the course of the comparison years with last year is $180 million, with an additional $101 million in 2028. If we're just looking at federal and state funding, again, you can see pretty significant expectations around federal funding, particularly in 2023 and 2024. Much of it's coming from the bipartisan infrastructure law and other federal funding that is anticipated to be passed through the state. So in 2023 alone, the assumption is $59 million additional federal funding, and in 2024, about $75 million. I'm not going to read through this list, but we just have a few highlights by agency by year of some major projects. This list isn't comprehensive, but it highlights some new things that if you're looking through proposals, you might want to pay attention to. I'll call a few of them out as we go through major requests by agency. So the next few slides are broken down by each agency's functional group. So this first group is administration and general government. There were no changes to the request for finance, the mayor's office, and zoo. And with IT, there were some increases, 1.8 million for cloud migration projects and 1.5 million for increases in fiber and wireless infrastructure, mostly due to increasing costs in these areas. In planning and development, there were no changes to economic development or planning's budget compared to last year's requests. In CDA redevelopment, the request adds about 1.8 million a year in public housing redevelopment, and it changes the source from borrowing to development funding. And this is more of a technical correction to have the budget reflect how these projects are actually being funded. Within CDD, there's $9 million of additional borrowing for the permanent men's shelter, and Jim spoke to this a bit in his presentation on ARPA to align that project with more recent budget estimates. And it adds $3 million a year in affordable housing development and continues funding for the accessory dwelling unit lending program and community facilities improvement program. For public facilities and public safety, the library does have some new projects, including a $1.4 million green and resilient project and increases in other projects due to primarily inflation and cost of materials. Monona Terrace didn't have any major changes, but had some cost increases, again, for inflation and materials costs. In the fire department, the agency requested moving a training project from the Horizon list into their budget, which adds 1.8 million over the course of the capital improvement plan. And the big increases in this functional group is police, which includes 15.7 million for the new North District Station and 22.9 million for the new property and evidence facility. Both of these projects were previously on the Horizon list and have been included in this year's CIP. The next group of agencies are engineering and utilities. In engineering, the list on the right highlights a few new projects that I won't read through all of them. One of the new programs includes building electrical upgrades to support more electric vehicle charging. And there are some additional roads, paths, and projects that are on the horizon, as well as increasing flood mitigation systems. And then for other public works agencies, Fleet is assuming 10 to 15% increases for inflation for both of their programs. And Parks has a big project, 6.3 million for land acquisition and 5.2 million for the Warner Park Community Center. And the streets request was on par with last year. And then the final grouping of agencies is transportation. So Metro includes, most of the increases are related to expected federal funds, which includes 6.4 million in federal bus facilities grant and 12.5 million in federal funds for the facilities project at Hanson Road. The big project in parking is 48 million for State Street Garage, which was previously on the Horizon list and has been brought to this committee earlier this year for discussion. Traffic engineering includes 43 million in federal grant funds for Safe Streets program, as well as some increases to other projects in the town of Madison and the town of Madison attachment. And transportation also has some significant federal funds expected, including 23 million in additional federal funding for East-West BRT and 56 million anticipated for North-South BRT. So as I was quickly running through the projects, one thing I mentioned was the Horizon list. I just wanted to clarify a few points around the Horizon list. This is where a list that has projects that meet a clear need but aren't fully planned to be included in the CIP. So projects can be on the Horizon list for a variety of reasons. One could be that it's pending securing external funds. So you'll see a few projects that were included into this year's CIP because they had secured external grants. Another major reason is operating impacts. So the agency might have a proposal to build a building or facility, but might not have a fully fleshed plan for how it will fund operations in the out years. So this might be a reason that an item is on the horizon list. Similarly, a project might be related to other policy decisions or analysis that needs to be conducted before it can be included for funding, or it might be pending another project to be completed before it can be sequenced. So projects can be added on the horizon list either by agency request. So as part of the budget development process, they'll submit, an agency can submit a request to the budget analyst to have something added to the horizon list. A project can be added as part of the executive budget development. So an agency may have requested a project to be included in their proposal, but after briefings and discussions, it might be decided that it's not quite ready to be part of the budget. And it can also be, items can be added or removed from the horizon list through the council amendment process. And then in terms of getting off the horizon list, I think two things can happen. One is it moves off the horizon list and into the CIP. So when the agency has sorted through all of the issues that need to be addressed, it can be added to the SIP in a subsequent year, or a project can be removed. And this can be either at agency request or through budget development if it's decided the project is no longer needed or no longer aligned with priorities. And then the last piece I wanted to mention is carry forward appropriations. So carry forwards reauthorize borrowing for projects included in prior years. So for example, if you had a project approved in 2022 and the work is ongoing in 2023, but the agency isn't requesting new funds, the funds that were originally appropriated in 2022 would be carried over into the upcoming year. Since there's no new funding being requested, it doesn't show up in the agency's requests. And we have traditionally added this as a file attached to Legistar that looks like what you see on the right. It has the agency, the project, and how much is being carried forward from a prior appropriation. This year, we're working on incorporating this in the executive book itself, so you don't have to reference an external file to see what's being carried forward. And we're hoping this brings some additional transparency to and readability to the budget. So that's something we are working on new for this year. So we just have a few more slides left. I'm going to turn it over to Dave to talk about developing the executive budget.
Thanks, Christine. So Christine ran through a lot of really useful information about the budget process, as well as the agency requests and how that compares to the prior to 2022 and what sort of pressures that we're seeing, particularly from inflation. So I'm going to try to do a step back a little bit further and try to take a look at what sort of lenses do we try to look through when we try to get a sense of, well, how big should the capital budget be? What are the limitations on it? So in contrast to the operating budget, we do not have something like the levy limit that's associated with the capital budget. What we do have, first of all, is a constitutional limit. So under the state constitution, our total debt issued, our total general obligation debt cannot exceed 5% of the city's equalized value, or 5% of our overall property value, just to put a shorthand to it. Right now, we're at about 1.7% of equalized value. And which is about $600 million. And so if we were at 5%, that would be $1.7 billion. So we could definitely go higher, just given that one lens of the constitutional requirement. And these two graphs at the bottom of of this slide just give you a sense of what that looks like. And then a projection using the agency request of where we would be as debt as a share of that constitutional limit. I'll move to the next slide. Now, another lens we look through is what is that cost of debt service, meaning the debt service, we issue debt to help finance the capital budget, that the repayment of that debt is paid in the operating budget. And you'll see that as the debt service line in the operating budget. So another lens we look through is what is that debt service in the general fund as a share of the city's general fund budget. That's been a measure we've used for many years. And you can see that it's gone from about 14% in 2015. Prior to 2015, it was below 12%. And we had sort of a very loose guideline of trying to keep it below 12%. Well, given the combination of, large scale need for infrastructure to replace large projects built 40, 50, 60 years ago, some of the good and this is a national problem or national issue. So one of the good examples is the Central Library project, a building built in 1965, and it had to be effectively rebuilt in 2012, or just our road and street network and the infrastructure beneath it. Much of the city's expansion occurred in the 1960s and 70s. And then that comes due. So we have to rebuild West Washington Avenue, for example. So anyways, we were at a lower level. We're at 14%. We're now at about 16%, 16.5%. You can see it's kind of gone up and down there over the last couple of years. And then under the 2022 adopted budget, it would go to about a little over 18% of the general fund budget by 2028. Under the agency request, it would be over 21%. Now, some of that growth under the agency request is due to, we have rising interest rates right now, and that means the city's debt will cost that much more. And so this does reflect a higher interest rate to try to reflect those impacts. We would, under the agency request, have higher debt service, and overall debt would be higher as we showed before. So that's another lens we look through. The other factor that contributes to this increase in the share of the budget is levy limits, meaning that the operating budget can't grow as fast because it is pretty severely constrained both by the levy limits and the state just doesn't give cities the breadth of revenue options that many cities around the country have, nor does it give it the same breadth of options, for example, that Dane County and other counties have with the half-cent sales tax. Next slide. So one way to take those lenses and look at a way to size the overall budget is to set a target borrowing level. Now, $100 million a year in the SIP, based on a series of other assumptions of how rapidly we issue that debt and so on, would keep that share of the general fund budget associated with debt service, would level it off rather than the peak increase that you see. So that's 100 million. What you see on average in the agency request is about 136 million, obviously quite a bit higher on a percentage basis. So that's taking those lenses, looking at it. This is one way to size what that budget is, and the mayor going through the agency requests and developing the executive budget. We'll look at these factors as well as the council as well. So putting the executive budget together, the mayor and the mayor's team, the finance staff. We also have a management review team that's made up of a number of key agency heads in the sort of public works, transportation, planning areas, as well as the equity division, administrator, IT, and so on. We have agencies come in, they brief the mayor, and the management review team is there to discuss those proposals. They're also being reviewed by the management review team in the sense of a subset of them that might be new money or new programs, looking at a series of factors for those. Again, looking at equity, sustainability, readiness, where does it line up with strategic plans and the fiscal impact, as well as the agency's priorities. And so all of that gets put together as the mayor makes decisions on, within that bigger picture, as well as these specific project criteria and measures. So that's the step back of the big picture, and be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Dave. Questions for Dave on that part, or for Christine on the beginning? Alder Vitever?
Thanks. I guess my question is, so we have certain projects that have some level of federal funding, like the men's shelter, for example, but that, that's not enough for it. And so I guess I'm just wondering, when we're looking at these projects, is there a way for us to have sort of that side-by-side comparison of like, we have federal funding for this, but here's what the city also has to put up to make this a reality, versus these are things we don't have federal funding for, and this would just be what the city would be doing on their own, kind of thing.
Yeah, that is part of that scoring process that we're going through with these projects. We tend to rate higher those that are both ready, but also are, have that mix of funding beyond just solely city GO. And we try to show that in the funding numbers that are in the budget, and Christine, I think, went through that in this presentation. And when the executive budget is brought to you, we'll go through that again in terms of those comparisons.
Alder Figueroa?
So, with regards to the north side, with the North District Police Station, I'm looking at it right now, and I thought that the 1.4 was the SIP was started in 2024, but it looked like it made it to the 2023 number. Is that
Alder, can I suggest that we stay focused on process and overview here, because we're not at the point of talking about the individual projects, really.
Well, that's fine, but that's kind of part of the process, though. Like, I'm trying to marry this presentation to the actual documentation so I can follow through what we're discussing. So, and on the numbers that were presented on the summary, are they only for 2023, or are they including, the projections for following years?
They're for the whole SIP.
Oh, okay. So everything from 2023 to 2028?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There you go. That's what I'm asking. I didn't. Now that first number that was mentioned makes sense. Yeah, got it. We're on the same page. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Other questions? All right, seeing none. Anything else on this, Dave or Christine? All right, well, let me sorry, go ahead, Dave.
I was just gonna say thank you. That was it.
Okay. So obviously, I will spend with staff weeks, months putting together the executive capital budget. Certainly, if you all are diving into the agency requests and have thoughts or requests or suggestions as we put together the executive, don't hesitate to let me know. All right, and then our last item is item 25, Legistar 70352, discussion on the meeting format for the 2022 Finance Committee. President Furman.
I guess I would jump in and have a question, but I don't want to do that unless you have anything to share with us first.
Go right ahead.
I guess my question would be: Is there a room ready for hybrid committee meetings if this board decided they were ready?
At today, no. I think that IT is projecting June. But I'd have to double check on. I've been focused on council chambers.
Same. So that's why I was unsure if like 2:15, if we had like a timeline for that. I think we need we're going to have a longer discussion soon at council meetings about what the council is doing. I'm ready to go back, but it is my strong preference not to be doing that without a hybrid component, especially for a meeting like this, where we have a lot of staff that's joining us. So that's my 2 cents, is that I'd like to see us have that hybrid option, and in order for this committee to return. But I'm curious to see what other people think.
Other thoughts? Alder Vitever?
I guess I just wanted to ask that we have clarity around whether committee members all have to be in one or the other if we're going hybrid.
That's one of the questions. I have a strong opinion on that front, but we don't have a policy decision there yet. Anyone else? Someone want to make a motion? Alder Furman?
Yeah, I mean, I would make a motion for this to be discussed at our next meeting. I think by then, I think Mayor, you and I believe that there'll likely be a discussion at council to start talking about the policy components, and I also think hopefully we'll have some more clarity on what's ready. So I'd make a motion that we refer this item, that we continue. Our next meeting is virtual, and that at our next meeting we discuss dates and possible some of the policy framework stuff that would be discussed at council on how to get this committee back in person.
All right, so that's a motion to have our next meeting virtually and to refresh this agenda item on that agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion, Alder Evers?
I was just raising my hand a second. That's all right. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder. All right, moved and seconded. Any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, we'll record that vote. And that brings us to the end of our agenda. A motion to adjourn would be in order.
Move adjournment.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. Is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your evening.